Hello, welcome to Co-Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Boston, and when I started this podcast, it was going to be for stand-up comedians who are healthcare professionals, and I'm already breaking my rules. But this guest is so amazing. He's worth it, totally worth it. I'm so happy to introduce Dr. Corey Jenks. He is a pharmacist. He does ambulatory pharmacy in the United States. He's based in Arizona. As well as being a pharmacist, he's an improv comedian. He's been doing improv comedy for about 10 years. He does improv comedy on its own, but he's also found a way to weave it into his work. And he's a keynote speaker. He teaches healthcare professionals improv to help make them better healthcare professionals. It's pretty amazing. He's also an author. He's got a book called Permission to Care. He's a dad. He's just a great guy. He also owns chickens, which I completely forgot to ask him about, you guys. I'm so sorry. I'll have to get him back to talk about chickens. I hope you enjoy this chat with Corey. I hope it inspires you actually to take an improv class, because if you haven't done improv, Corey's going to make you want to. It'll make you a better person, I promise. That's a guarantee. Please enjoy my chat with Corey Jenks. Very, very happy to introduce our next guest, Corey Jenks. What do you say after your name for pharmacist?
For pharmacist, I could be hoity-toity and say PharmD, or I could make people call me Dr. Corey Jenks. I require none of those things unless you are a family member or made fun of me in high school, in which case it is Dr. Jenks to you.
Okay. All right. In a professional capacity, it's doctor.
Yeah. My wife's a nurse practitioner, so between the two of us, we joke we make one real doctor. Like, she's got a DNP, I have a PharmD. Like, between the years of training, it's like almost one real doctor.
Right. And a DVM, dog doctor here. So, yeah.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I don't hold people to the doctor very much, like I said, because it's confusing and I don't think it respects real physicians. So, but yes, technically I am Dr. Jenks. That's a very long way of saying that is my professional title.
Well, welcome, Dr. Jenks, or Corey. I'm just going to call you Corey if that's cool.
We're on a first name basis now.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm so happy to have Corey Jenks with us. He is a pharmacist and an improv comedian, and he's got an amazing way of kind of weaving those two things together. I'm going to start with you like to say the left brain stuff. I'm going to start with your job as a pharmacist, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So tell us about what it's like to be a pharmacist, what your day job's like, how you got into this area of medicine.
Yeah, so I chose pharmacy when I was 16 years old, and my chemistry teacher asked me what I wanted to do when I grow up, and I said, I want to play for the Chicago Cubs, and she said, you're not going to do that, so you might as well pick something that's useful, and if you thought about pharmacy, you're pretty good at chemistry. And so that started me down my path at 16 years old, picking a career when my frontal cortex wasn't fully formed, but here we go. And so I went into pre-pharm pharmacy school 6 years straight at the University of South Carolina, and I graduated way back in 2011, which is now like over a decade ago, which is making me feel very old, but here we are. And so I practice in what's called ambulatory care. So I don't count pills. I don't work in a hospital. My parents are very confused about what I do until I wrote my book. Then they finally realized what I do as a pharmacist. And I said, all it took was writing a book in 10 years. Great. Think of me like a physician's assistant. So if you have diabetes or high blood pressure or obesity, and I really specialize in diabetes and obesity, you go to your provider, whether it's a real doctor, a real doctor, physician, NP, PA, and they could start you on a medicine for the diabetes, refer you to my clinic. And because I have this collaborative practice agreement with the provider, I can actually write prescriptive. I have prescriptive authority to adjust medicine, start, stop. I mean, my personal left brain professional preference is to get people off as many medicines as possible, dealing with the diseases of lifestyle. So diabetes, obesity. And so that's my day job. And I work my day job 2 to 3 days a week because my other day job is taking care of our 3 kids under 5 years old, helping my wife out who's a nurse practitioner. So yeah, that's the day-to-day aspect of my job. I love talking to patients. I think that's the area of pharmacy I'm most well-suited for, and kind of dovetails into my right-brained stuff that I do. I talk to patients. I try to convince them to eat better, exercise more, get off their medicines, and adjust their medicines. The best days are when you stop them, but sometimes you got to start them and increase them. That's my day job in a nutshell.
Yeah, so it's very dichotomous because you're a pharmacist who doesn't want to push drugs.
Yeah, I'm a weirdo in so many ways. I'm not a traditional pharmacist. Like, again, I picked this at 16, and which is great. It's been a great profession. I've met amazing people, had some really cool jobs. I worked at the VA before I came to my current job, and here in the States, that's all the veterans. And so hearing their stories and taking care of them was about the best patient population I could have asked for. But I also realized a few years into it that I wasn't making people healthier with all the drugs we gave them. And it was actually a very sad existence to be on 15, 20 medicines, be told your hemoglobin A1C is good and that you're, quote, healthy because we've met our metric. So I've been on a mission to simplify patients' drug regimens, get them off as much as they can, and just get them engaged in their care. And a lot of that is developing trust, which is where some of these other skills that I have as a weirdo pharmacist come into play.
Right. You don't want to just throw people on statins. That seems like that's just my perception.
Like, I do not.
Oh, you need a statin. I'm like, do they?
Oh my gosh. You twitched, you need a statin, right? Wow.
So you're not the classical pharmacist. And I totally understand that because I'm a veterinarian, but I do just cancer surgery. But no one understands that at all. So they're just like, you're a vet and you're with like puppies and kittens. And it's just the way they think of a vet. And I think a pharmacist, like I'm guilty of it too. I think of a pharmacist, even though I have friends who are pharmacists, but I think of a pharmacist in the pharmacy, like, because that's my interaction with a pharmacist is either a veterinary hospital that has a pharmacy or the pharmacy that I go to as a patient. So it's a really interesting area that you're in. And maybe this is why you do this, but I don't know if you can answer this, but what's the biggest challenge for pharmacists?
Talking to people, talking like a human being. Well, I think the biggest challenge as pharmacists, and I'll speak for the ones here in the United States, especially working in retail, is just getting pulled in a million different directions. I won't say the retail pharmacies, but there's the big two or three, and they don't have enough technician help. They are under these incredible pressures to vaccinate, fill prescriptions, call insurance companies. The job itself is challenging, but as you mentioned, I'm not a normal pharmacist, and I think because we struggle like connecting with people, talking to people, we're very robotic, and I think that our training lends ourselves to do that. Where, admittedly, you want a perfect pharmacist that doesn't mess up medications. Like, I'm not here advocating for med errors. It doesn't lend yourself to try new things, to take risks in interactions. And there's so many students, and I think, I'm getting older, so I can say, get off my lawn, I'm old. As a generation, you're getting people who have been raised on computer screens and phone screens that haven't had the interactions that they've had with other people. Like the students and residents I've interacted with as pharmacists that are the most interesting and most effective are usually ones who've had a life prior to pharmacy, waited tables, worked in catering, had a business, did non-healthcare things, worked as a flight attendant. All these people had to gain the personal skills that are then useful in talking to patients and in expressing these ideas and treatment plans in a way that connects with that human being in front of them.
All right. So let's get into that because that's kind of your other side and maybe your other passion. It's about 10 years. Is that right? You've been an improv comedian?
Yeah, I just celebrated my 10-year improv anniversary back in, as we recorded this in September of 23, in January of 23 is my 10th year of improv.
Did you get into improv because you recognize this need, or was it just like, I'm done school, I want to do something fun? What brought you to improv?
I've always loved comedy. I grew up on The Simpsons. Like, for better or worse, I had a TV in my room at 5 years old and was watching The Simpsons and was just told by my parents, do the opposite of Bart. Okay, great. So I loved that. I loved watching Saturday Night Live. Grew up on Comedy Central, so watching old reruns. Shout out to the Canadians, the Kids in the Hall. Like, loved all of that. And so I got to college, and there was actually an improv comedy troupe at where I went to school. And I went there, first couple of weeks of school, you're just experimenting, learning new stuff, what's available. And I'm like, oh my gosh, improv, this is amazing. So naturally, I ignored that and focused on my studies for 6 years because I was logical, which in retrospect, I could have done this and done school, but whatever. So I had finished my residency training in 2012 and was dating my now wife, and she was starting nurse practitioner school, and my birthday was coming on up, and she asked me what I wanted. And I was like, I have time now. This is cool. Why don't I pursue this thing I've been interested in for almost half a decade, this thing that I've loved, comedy since I was a kid. And so I just took an improv class, and it wasn't because I'm going to do this to be a better pharmacist. It was, this seems fun and I've always wanted to do it. And I have the time and the money to finally do it. And it just sort of snowballed from a class to, I loved the first one, did the second one, did the third one. And I'm here in Tucson, Arizona. It was at a theater that was just getting started. So I had a pulse and had done the classes. So I got to perform and eventually taught classes, coached teams, ran our comedy school. And along the way realized, oh, I hate pharmacy a lot less because I can actually talk and adapt to the weird stuff that happens.
Okay, that's really cool. I really want to talk about that. That's like the most important thing. But I want to talk about improv a little bit, just in case there's people listening who aren't as familiar with improv. If you can describe it, kind of what improv performance is in a nutshell, and then also just talk a little bit about the yes and, which is kind of what we all think of when we think of improv.
Yeah, so improv comedy is essentially a form of theater where everything is made up, the characters, the plot, the setting, and there's numerous different varieties. There's the gateway drug, which I call Whose Line Is It Anyway, where it's short form improv. You're playing short games, get a suggestion, play a kind of a sticky game. It's fun, it's high energy. There's kinds of improv where you get a one word suggestion and turn it into 30 minutes of comedy. I've done improvised rapping, which I won't make you do today. I've done storytelling turned into improv. So there's all these different forms. And you mentioned these two words, yes and. So if you take away nothing about improv but two words, it's yes and, which I've adopted as sort of a life philosophy. And so improv works really well when we say yes and, which means if someone starts a scene, we say yes and we agree to their reality. And if we say no, it totally negates what they've created. It brings everything to a grinding halt. But what I love about yes and as a life philosophy is that in healthcare, a lot of our default answers are just no. And that's what I think was really feeling the friction when I started my career. Can I get more time with my patients? No. Is drug covered? No. Am I going to live? No. Ooh, just making sure you're paying attention there. But you step into this place for a couple hours a week where the default answer is it has to be yes. And this whole world opens up on stage. And then you start saying yes to more things in life. And your life can really open up as well.
It's kind of separate. Like you're doing improv is more like not really a hobby because you were teaching at a school. So, but
for what I was paid, it was a hobby.
That sounds like my stand-up career.
Famously poorly compensated form of art. So
okay,
yeah.
I just don't want to insult you by calling it a hobby, but I hear you. And people are like, "Are you going to retire?" I'm like, "No, I can't.
Not on this."
No, that's not going to happen. I can pay for parking. That's about where I'm at right now with my stand-up. So they were kind of separate, and then I don't know if you can describe what happened to your brain when you were just like. Was it gradual or did you just have an epiphany where you're like, oh, wait a second, this is how did that happen? I guess, what was that process for you?
I would say it was like a gradual build to an epiphany when I showed up for work one day and wasn't fretting what the patient in front of me was going to say. It became a game. Improv is a game. Healthcare, when you're interacting with a person, a patient, a dog, we have these rules. Improv has rules, yes, and a few other rules, right? We have these structures, whether it's short form, whether it's what's called a herald, which is our long form. But within it, anything can happen. It's sort of like sports. People keep watching football games, even though it's the same rules, the same time that's within a game, but anything can happen within those parameters. Same thing within an improv scene, same thing within a healthcare interaction. And it stopped being this world of hoping that they didn't say something I didn't know or trying to have every answer pre-chambered because that's what my perfectionist pharmacist brain was. It just became a relaxed world of listening in the moment and reacting. Someone comes into my office, demands a prostate exam, which actually happened, which they never taught you what to do in pharmacy school if someone demands a prostate. I specifically got into pharmacy to not do holes. I don't like that. I don't like fluids. I don't like touching stuff. I'm happy to adjust your medications. I'm not touching your prostate, especially not your prostate. How can you react to that in a way that's empathetic, supportive, and where you still will keep that relationship with the patient and they'll listen to you about their blood sugar control?
Well, how did you deal with that? I wouldn't have thought to ask a pharmacist that. Not that I have a prostate, but...
They were asking for it because they've been told if they wanted their Viagra refill, they needed a prostate exam. Oh. And so I literally yes-handed. I said, yes, I could give you a prostate exam and you wouldn't enjoy it, and I wouldn't enjoy it, and you would not get your Viagra. And we'd be in the same place we are right now. So let's focus on your blood sugars. And when you leave, you make an appointment with your doctor because I know they would love to give you that prostate exam. So it showed that they felt seen, heard, and understood, which I think is a lot of what improv does for healthcare. It makes the patient, or if you're in management or leadership, when you make that employee or that patient feel seen, heard, and understood, they're more likely to listen to whatever it is else you're going to say. So I hear you. You want that prostate exam. And let me tell you, it would be a terrible idea for both of us. And I can understand why you would like that Viagra. I'm sure you would enjoy that experience. But I cannot give that to you, and I need to take care of your blood sugar. Because if we don't, and that doctor sees I didn't help you with that, they're not going to give you that prostate exam. So it's that, I hear your problem. I want to help you, but here's how I can help you today.
It's interesting, though. You didn't say, yes, I'm going to give you a prostate exam. You're like, yes, you need a prostate exam, and I'm going to help you get that, but it's not going to be from me. I find that really interesting because that's what I struggle with the yes and sometimes. Here's an example. It just happened yesterday. I had a client and I walked in the room and he was just he was an older man. He was just miserable. Everything I said, he was miserable. He was rude. It was awful. And I tried to present him with 2 different options for his pet that had a tumor. He didn't want anything. And he ended up mad and he left. And I called because there's a referral. So I called the referring veterinarian and I was like, hey, like, I just want you to know this didn't go well. I don't know what happened. I don't know what I did wrong. And they were like, oh, he's miserable. He's a miserable man. Like, we've almost fired him as a client. So I was like, hey, like, you could have given me a heads up. But then I was like, besides going in the back and complaining about it, I'm like, okay, I'm sure you have clients that are like that because, or I don't know if you call them clients or patients. I'm sorry, but patients or clients that are like that. So if you have someone who's just miserable with you, like nothing you say is right, they're not happy with anything. How are you using your improv training to kind of go like, I guess, yes, and, or I don't know, like, how do you manage that?
I think a big part of improvisation is accepting reality. Yes, and means we are saying yes to whatever that reality is. So yeah, I had a patient here in the States, we'll call it just like that this week, that didn't seem to want to be there. They didn't seem engaged in their care. And like when I tell people I'm an improv comedian, I do pharmacy, they're like, oh, you must be like Patch Adams telling jokes to everybody. That's not true.
Yeah.
Great improvisation is acknowledging what that reality is, even if you don't like it. So when I have a situation like that, I accept this person is miserable. They are upset. I will do everything I can to engage in their care. And that is all I can do. I'm not going to take it personally. The sad thing is they've probably had a difficult life, a lot of trauma, a lot of issues. They're not angry at me. They're angry about everything else that has happened in their life. And I am the person in front of them today. That's where that is manifesting. So you can be as kind as you can. You can listen as much as you can. You can provide as much professional advice as you did with your client. And that is all we can control. And I think improv is also a lot of letting go of control. Letting go of the outcome. Like we start this scene, I don't know where it's going to go. It's really hard because you want to help people. Your heart's in this to help. But the other piece of this, like you mentioned, communication is a huge piece of improvisation. So if they could have said, heads up, this person is very unhappy. They're a miserable person.
Yeah.
That would be helpful for you to go into this knowing that this is going to be a challenge, but we do the best we can with the information we're given, of course.
Yeah. I felt really crummy about it until I called them. And then I was like, oh, okay. Like I didn't think it was me, but I was like, it was a funny day yesterday. It was a funny day of clients. I don't know what was going on. You kind of answered this, and I don't know if you have more to say on it, but, and I'm sorry, I don't know if I should call them clients or patients or customers.
You say whatever you want and I'll yes and it. I know what you're talking about.
Okay. You know what I mean? I just don't want to insult your profession, but.
We deserve insulting. It's fine.
No, I love pharmacists. Shout out to pharmacists.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a pharmacist, so I can self-deprecate.
Okay. I'm so happy to have you on our podcast. You bring lessons that you learn from improv and you're trying to make someone's experience with you better. How do you do that?
Identify their want or their why. So in an improv scene, there's no way I could possibly know everything about my character or the character across from me. But if I know that I want you to notice my haircut, everything I say or do will be filtered through that want. There will be a history as to why you would care about. I would want you to care about my haircut. And once you do, it is a matter of flow. And it's not easy to do. Like it takes a lot of practice to identify these wants within scenes. But as soon as you figure out like the want of each perspective, you just play that, we call it the game of the scene in improv, the funny thing, if you will. You identify it and you just play it. And so with your patients, not everyone wants to quit smoking. Not everyone wants to put down the cookies. But maybe they want to be able to keep up with their grandkids. Maybe they want to be able to go to a football game and get to the top. They can only afford the seats at the top. So how can they walk to the top? What do they care about? What if they hate big pharma? Great. I want to get you off these drugs. Stop making them rich. Like all these different ways of trying to figure out, like, what do they care about? And then filter your advice through what they hopefully would care about.
Okay. I love that. That's really profound, actually, because that is in my improv training. That's definitely what you're supposed to be doing, is trying to figure out, what do I want? What does the other character want? And then like, is there conflict, or how are we going to resolve that? And how do we resolve the scene? So I do really love that. So the other area that I think improv is kind of interesting is kind of more from the corporate perspective, or like working with teams, so not just client facing, but like working with the team of people that you work with, whether it's a corporate setting or a hospital or pharmacy. So I don't know if you can speak to that, because I know you do a lot of training in that. Like, how does improv help you just work better as a team?
One, it develops huge trust. So from an improv perspective, I go on stage with a group of people that I have practiced with, rehearsed with, to make strangers laugh. And when I tell that to a person who's never got on stage to do improv, that's like terrifying to them. Like, you're going to try to make strangers laugh. But a lot of that trust is developed with understanding who we are, understanding each other's wants, desires. Like, we literally will tap each other on the back and say, I got your back, before we go on stage. So a huge part of that training that I'll do with groups, with hospitals, with organizations is trying to identify, like, where is this trust? How is this trust amongst your employees? Also identifying, we call it group mind. When you work together as a group, Are you working towards a common goal? Because the cynic, I'm here in America where it is for-profit healthcare. So you can have a company say, we care about patients. But if you have shareholders, who do you really care about? You care about your shareholders and making a profit. So just be honest. And that's another huge part of comedy. Truth in comedy is the main manual of improv. What is the truth? If you can find that truth as a group and be open and honest and communicate effectively, as an employee, I'm not upset you're trying to make money. I'm upset that you're lying to me, that you are pretending that you don't care about making money when you are cutting budgets, cutting hours, cutting all of these things that clearly show you don't care about patients. Now, I don't love that, but if you are honest with me, then maybe we could work together in a group with the trust that I've developed with you to say, okay, you are having these challenges as an organization. Thanks for being honest with me. Let's work as a group to try to figure these out versus pretending that these problems don't exist.
Oh, I love that. It just reminded me, I'm a locum right now because I took a little comedy break.
Sure.
So there is corporate veterinary medicine in Canada as well as in the States, and it's changing our profession, probably the way it's changed yours. But some VP, high muckety muck, they keep hiring VPs. I don't really know what they do.
We need more middle managers. That is what's going to fix our healthcare system. We need more people who don't participate in actual patient care.
Yes, who don't know what it's like in the hospital anymore. But yeah, with more sound bites. So yeah, their email said this new VP introducing themselves, and it said, we're going to put staff, patients, and clients first. And I was like, that's 3 things. And they can't be first. You can't have 3 things first. It's not possible. So anyway, that just made me, I'm like, just be honest, about what your mission is. And you can have multiple missions, but you can't have 3 things be number 1.
Well, and that's another improv tenet is go deeper, not wider. So people who are new to improv start thinking that we have to do all these different funny things within a scene. But if you can find that one funny thing and build a skyscraper of interesting things versus building the suburb, you're going to get a deeper level of comedy. And that's what I see happening with businesses, healthcare organizations, as you try to do so many things, you go wider instead of deeper, and nothing really gets solved unless you're a VP and you can hire more VPs, then it's good for you. but yeah, it's go deeper, not wider is one of those other tenets that I talk about, when I do a training or when I talk about in the book as well.
Okay. Is there any other important, you've hit on, okay, so there's yes and, go, watch me mess them up. I'm going to say it wrong.
Go deeper, not wider. Trust, find the want,
and then find the want. Is there any ones that we're missing that are you're this is important? People need to understand this concept, if you're doing a training for people.
This is insultingly simple, but listen intently. So live in the moment and listen intently. Because how many times have you gone to a physician, a doctor with this big problem you're scared about, and you can already tell they've made up their mind? You don't feel seen, heard, understood. You're upset. You're not going to engage in your care. And the other thing with improv is people say, I'm not funny. I couldn't do this. Well, it's not about being funny. It's about living in the moment and responding honestly. If you work in healthcare, you're so smart. We try to use our smart brains to fix these problems. But the answer is always right in front of us. You look at that person in front of you and you respond honestly, and you will find that solution if you are able to listen in the moment. We're so bad at that as a society, whether it's, the doctor that's already listening, or if you have a significant other, which I'm guilty of, they come to you and you're like, I have the fix. And you're like, they just want you to listen to them. And that's the thing. My wife's done improv training. I've done it, obviously. And I don't profess to be the best pharmacist. She doesn't profess to be the best nurse practitioner. But the feedback we get from so many patients is, you are the first person who has listened to me, which makes me feel great and makes me feel terrible, because these are not 2-year-olds. They are 60, 70-year-old humans who've been in the healthcare system for 60, 70 years. And no one's listened to them. And it's so simple. But we need to train our brains to be able to do that. And so that's a lot of what improv training does as well, is forces you to listen and be in the moment.
No, I love that. I think that did change me a little bit, even just in conversation. I'm trying not to do it now too, but they say that a lot of times, someone's talking to you and the whole time you're like, what am I going to say? You're not listening. You're just coming up with what you are going to respond to them. And I think that happens at work. It happens probably with our clients/patients. Yeah, dogs don't do that.
Yeah, well, it's like we were talking before we went on, recording live. I'm good, whatever. Let's start, because I'm just going to respond, and the conversation shall go. We'll accept where it goes, and it's harder for you because you have some points you want to hit, which is, you're trying to host this, ask me questions, bounce back. So in this situation, you're doing a great job of listening and also balancing the many plates we have, which is what healthcare is, right? So this is just a great case example of learning to use those muscles in your brain of living in the moment and balancing all these tasks that pull at us.
I want to give a quick thank you to our title exclusive sponsor, Hill's Pet Nutrition. Thank you so much. This podcast wouldn't be possible without them. And a very quick story. This company actually started in the late 1930s when a veterinarian named Dr. Mark Morris developed a new diet in his kitchen to help a man whose seeing eye dog was in renal failure or kidney failure. And even from those humble beginnings, this company hasn't changed that much because Hill still believes in good quality ingredients. They believe in working with veterinarians and they believe in science. So thanks, Hills, and thanks, science. And I have so much gratitude for your help with this podcast. I think it's time for our sticky game. What do you think?
I think this is a great time for that.
I'm very excited. I want everyone to know that I don't know what Corey's going to do. We have no plan. It could be a disaster. We don't care. We're going to play an improv game.
I'm not projecting that into the universe right now. This is going to be fun.
Oh, that's a bad idea. This is going to be the most amazing.
It's going to be the best piece of comedy you've ever heard.
Colin Mockery is going to phone us
he's
and invite us onto Whose Line.
We need you now. Drop your careers and your families.
You need to come, and be the healthcare improv team that Whose Line has been missing. Yeah.
There's a huge niche on Whose Line. There is not enough healthcare professionals on the show.
I think it's a problem that it's unrecognized. So that show, apparently, though, I have insider information. They recorded all day to come up with 22 minutes of gold.
Yeah. Improv has not lent itself very well to like recordings. So it's really hard to get, like we'll record sets and it's just not as magic as when you're in the moment. Whereas I think stand-up lends itself more to that recorded back. I'm old enough to have had CDs, you put the comedy CD in, you just listen to it over and over again. Improv, it's a little bit harder because you're living in that moment. It's disposable comedy. What happens there is gone once you're done. But we haven't done ours yet, so we need to play our little game. So we're going to play a game. We're going to play a game called One Word Story. It's really simple. We're just going to go back and forth. I'll give you the title of a story that's never been told before. We'll each say one word at a time, creating this coherent story. Now, the goal here is not to be funny. The goal here is just to create a story that makes sense. When we start, you will get the first word, and then I'll go with a word and back and forth until we've hit a good place with the story where I feel it is wrapped up and we're in a good spot.
Okay.
Does that sound good? See, clear communication, another tenet. You're good. We're on the same page. Awesome.
Yeah, I got your back, Corey.
Oh, I got your back. All right. So the title of our story, and this is sort of in your wheelhouse, I think, is The Happy Puppy. So the title of our story is The Happy Puppy. Whenever you're ready, you may start.
All right. The Happy Puppy. Once
upon
a
time
there
was
a
very
happy
puppy.
His
best
day
ever
was
when
he
got
adopted
by
a
lovely
family
of
chipmunks.
He
said,
"Wow,
chipmunks?
Okay.
I
love
my
life." And scene. Great. What a wild ride that was.
That was wild. I don't know why I said chipmunks, Corey.
It's improv. There's no wrong answer. It was on your mind. Answer. Did you think this story about the happy puppy was going to involve chipmunks?
I did. I had no idea that. No.
Yeah. But it was great. It was super fun. We created a coherent, the plot might not have been what we thought it would be, but it was coherent. And so this is a story. This is a game where we couldn't be thinking too far ahead, because if we thought this story was going to involve, I was actually thinking you would say cats, a family of cats, because that would be
oh, really?
Perfect, opposite. But we didn't. We went chipmunks. So if you're thinking too far ahead, you're not in the moment. You're not responding well. We're doing this work as a team. We've never done this story before. I can guarantee to your audience we've never played this game together before. But we were able to work together, create a coherent story. I like the give and take of the different words that we use when we do this story, because sometimes it's chipmunks and it's the big funny word, and sometimes it's that was is but or and. Right? It's like the alley-oop in basketball. Someone's got to throw that pass to let someone slam dunk at home. But that's healthcare, right? You don't get to do your surgeries unless someone's cleaned that room. We don't get to do our jobs unless everyone has done their jobs. And we have to appreciate all those different pieces to make this machine work. So that was our improv game. You can take a deep breath. We are done with
It was so fun. It was so fun. I think that is the lesson of that game is sometimes you have to be the.
Yeah.
And actually your of changed the story because I thought we were done at family. I didn't put a period on it because you don't do that. But I was like, they were adopted by family. And I was like, something else is going to happen. But you went of. And I was like, well, I did get stuck there. There's a pause. I was like,
okay.
Of humans? I was like, that doesn't make sense. So it's going to be something else. So anyway, that was fun.
I kind of did that on purpose.
You did. Yeah.
Yeah.
To kind of like push the story somewhere. No, it was great. I love it. I've been saying for a long time, I've been on other people's podcasts, like more veterinary related. And I'm like, veterinarians, take an improv class. Like, just do it. It's almost becoming your life's work. Or is that fair to say?
What I'm doing with going out and teaching healthcare professionals, like these skills, it's like I wrote a whole book on it. I try to go out and speak and work with as many groups as possible. If you're asking me what's more fun, practicing pharmacy or teaching improv to people, improv is more fun. I think that both have very important roles in the healthcare system, but I think it's just avoid that. If anyone listening has interacted with their healthcare providers or the office staff or a hospital, you have probably experienced the trouble that us with left brain people have with communicating and treating you like a human being. So that is, part of that life's work for sure.
So there was a lot of stuff that happened during the pandemic, I think across the board in veterinary medicine, human healthcare, every country, I would say. But I don't know, like, did that change things for you? Did it just make you say, yeah, this is the right thing to be doing? Or how did it change, what you're doing with your career and with improv?
So it actually gave me the chance to write my book, Permission to Care, Building a Healthcare Culture That Thrives in Chaos. So 2019 was when I really started focusing on trying to get out and speak to people. And I was like, 2020 is my year. I'm going to get on the road a lot. I'm going to make this thing legit. And in true yes and fashion, COVID happened in March of 2020. Our second son was due in June. It's like, okay, I have 3 months. I'm definitely not going to go out speaking. What can I do? And I'd had this idea for a book for several years and had been outlining ideas. So I just took 3 months and said, okay, I have 3 months to get this done before we have 2 kids. And we are now on man-to-man defense. So in a sense, like, listen, I would never wish another COVID again. I would never wish another pandemic again for the world, for everybody. But again, this is that acceptance of reality that improv teaches you. So I can pretend that it's not happening. I can be angry that it is happening. Or I could say, I'll never have another 3 months of being stuck at home to write this book. That was the personal side of it. From a global healthcare side of it, I think that we saw a lot of forced yes-anding. Like I ended up working from home in my previous job. We had been asking for years to work from home. And then we're told, no, typical healthcare answers. And within 2 weeks, it was like, you have to work from home. I was like, you had this technology the whole time? Like that was what irritated me. And then it dawned on me, like, we need better leadership to listen to its employees, to find ways to make these solutions happen. So, COVID was a very contentious issue, depending on however you looked at it. And it just, to me, highlighted the need for people being willing to listen and have some curiosity versus immediately shutting down and saying no. But I cannot change how society thinks. I can only work on my little sphere of the world, one little workshop at a time.
Yeah. For me, I think it solidified. I was like, we need improv because I feel like, I'm sure veterinarians, pharmacists, doctors, like there's a lot of similarities. The people that go into these professions have a lot of similarities. And I found during the pandemic, veterinarians, they always were, but they were so binary about things. Like we had people sitting in their car for 8 hours waiting to get an emergency. And we were just like, well, that's just the way it is. And I'm like, people are going to be furious when they come in. But they couldn't, like, they just couldn't see another solution. And I'm like, I think improv training would it would really help with this. So anyway, that's, I think we all need you. We all need improv training. Can you talk a little about your book and just, I know you can't talk about your whole book, but like, what is Permission to Care and what was your mission when you were writing this book?
Yeah. So the book is titled Permission to Care, Building a Healthcare Culture That Thrives in Chaos, found in all big major bookstores named after the Amazon rainforest. And I think it's a great book for all levels of healthcare. Like I wrote it for a frontline practitioner to teach a lot of the rules and tenets that we have talked about today on the podcast. There's links to some YouTube videos showing how to play One Word Story and a couple other games that you can take. Like I've done One Word Story in my huddles before the workday starts to warm us up, to get on the same page, to relax us, to build that trust, to build that rapport. So I think it's a great tactical book for applying it to your practice and your everyday life. Because I mean, my mother was a public school teacher for years, and she read it and she's like, this would be great for teachers. And I said, well, improv's kind of great for everybody. So to write a book for an audience of everyone it's a terrible idea. But I think that even if you don't work in healthcare, you have interacted with a healthcare system, and you would love a healthcare system where the providers and employees have a culture that is like this. But I also wrote it for leadership, because that part of building a healthcare culture that thrives in chaos, I think a lot of the pain points that I've experienced as a pharmacist, us left brain people that like things, a certain way, the pain comes from when the day gets away from us and doesn't go as planned. But the truth is, every day in healthcare is chaotic. Every day doesn't go as planned. Everything isn't how we want it to be. So are we going to gnash our teeth and wish it was different? Or are we going to accept reality and utilize these tools to move forward and take care of our patients, our clients, our pets, whoever, whatever ecosystem you're working in, to be more effective? Because I think that was the big turning point, the epiphany, the slow build to the epiphany for me was I kept thinking, like, when it's this, it'll be good. And then it was the realization, it will never be this. So I must make myself as solid as I can to deal with all of the inevitable crap that comes up.
All right. I have a dark question.
Ooh.
You just made me think of something. It just popped in my head. So I don't know if you know this, but there's a lot of issues with burnout and depression and mental health issues in my profession, in veterinary medicine, which is a lot of...
I've heard, yeah.
Yeah, it's why I do comedy, and what, it's kind of my mission is to try to bring some comedy to my profession and maybe other healthcare professions, because I feel like I agree we need improv. I think we need comedy. We need to lighten up just as a group. And I don't know as much about pharmacy, like as a profession or pharmacist. Is there the same issues with burnout and mental health issues in your profession?
100% yes. I kind of alluded to the typical community pharmacist working, behind the counter, filling prescriptions, doing vaccinations, doing all these things. They bear the brunt of it because they're dealing with an angry public that wants their meds and they're upset that they're expensive, et cetera. You have people in the drive-through honking their horns. You have people trying to steal the med, once thefts, all those things. But in hospitals too, we all have our different shift work, different issues with whatever area we're in. And, personally myself, I step back to part-time to partly take care of my kids, partly pursue this passion that I have. That's kind of a hobby, but kind of a calling, take care of my kids. But also there was a level of, I just needed to step off the treadmill. Healthcare is stressful. It's hard. It's demanding. It's calling. And we don't always get the support we need from our higher ups to appropriately deal with that. And I'm saying this as pharmacists. So I think improv helps in a couple of ways. One, like if you can create a culture that has a sense of humor about the reality of things, like I worked for the federal government for over a decade, like it's absurd realities that we heighten in comedy, right? So if you're able to see that, you can at least laugh at it. But I also think for me as someone, as an improviser, as profession, as another hobby, like I identified 100% with pharmacy. And when you have a bad day, your whole day is dark and terrible. But if you have these other outlets you can find, and it doesn't have to be improv, it could be playing a sport, playing an instrument. Like if your job as a vet that day sucked, but you went home and you rocked out on your guitar or played it or did an improv game, your whole day wasn't darkened by that, if that makes sense. And I went into pharmacy, like I said, at like 16, making my choice. Like my whole world was pursuing this goal. And when I get out and it's like, this is it, it was very difficult. And it wasn't until I found improv and other activities to have outlets that I realized there's a world outside of this and it doesn't have to be everything about me.
I love that. Okay. I'm a nerd. I don't know if you know that yet about me, but maybe you've
picking
picked it up.
Picking up the nerd vibes. And in these times, nerd is a compliment. So
yeah, I wear it well. Yeah.
Yeah. I have nerd tendencies on certain things. So I say that around my mother and she's like, you're not a nerd. I'm like, we're not old like you, Mom. Nerd isn't an insult anymore. And she's like, I get it. Like, you won't ever, boomer. Sorry.
I like being a nerd, but
needlessly insulting to my mom. But
yeah. Take it easy on your mom, Corey. So I kind of one area I like to nerd out, and I know you know a bit about this, if you can speak to this, is like people can think improv is like airy fairy, woo woo, whatever, but there's science behind improv. There's real science about how it affects our brains and how it affects us. I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit.
Oh, you want a nerd out contest? Because I'm
Yeah.
about to nerd out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I call improv evidence-based comedy because there is primary. Yeah, right. I haven't even trademarked it, so you can steal that. Use it. Improv. There's medical literature or scientific literature showing that it improves patient, and this is in healthcare. There's a couple of pharmacy ones, a couple of ones for medical school training that shows it improves communication. It creates empathy, and there's scientific studies showing that empathy improves patient outcomes. But the other thing that improv does, like it's adult play essentially. And you talked about burnout, and then all of our bosses say you need to be more resilient, but they don't give us the tools. We're going to have a 30-minute PowerPoint meeting on resilience, and then we'll have checked our box, and you can be resilient now. The reality is you should let us outside for 30 minutes to go play something, because when we play, it actually makes the connections in our brain more resilient, more adaptable, so that when we have those stressful things come up, we are actually more resilient. So play builds resilience. Improv is play. Thus, improv builds resilience, to use my SAT analogies there. So there's certainly science behind it. And that's when I go talk, like a lot of what I do when I'm speaking to healthcare professionals, they want this to be accredited for CME. And I'm like, great, I got all this literature to support it. So if you're listening and you're like, we want a cool, fun CME, I can give you a cool accredited CME with the evidence to back it up as well.
Amazing. Yeah. I love it on its own. Like I love comedy and improv on its own, but then like bringing it into the healthcare professions is just like, I'm like, no, it's it's not flaky. I'm not flaky, everyone. It's science.
And there's a couple of medical schools, pharmacy schools that have incorporated improv into their curriculum because they've realized the value of it. And one of the studies in medical school, that was 10 hours of improv instruction, and beyond it being useful, the participants said they would repeat it again. And I don't know about anyone listening who's ever been through some sort of healthcare training. There's nothing about that I would want to repeat. So that the fact that they would say this is worth repeating to me says, oh, this is actually really valuable. And it's improv is an abstract concept to sell to people who are in healthcare and very left brain and very practical.
Yeah. And a lot of vet schools, like, I don't know, they'll be like, there's yoga at 6. And then there's this, but like they have 6 exams the next day. I'm like, and then they're like, well, they didn't come for their yoga. Like, yeah. Like, how are you thinking that that's going to work? Yeah.
Yeah. And we can't ignore the technical training that has to be done. Like, you want a competent healthcare professional, but you want a happy one that can communicate as well. So yes, you need to learn the hard book knowledge, but at the same time, if you can't communicate it in a way to make your patients care, that is pointless and it's useless.
All right. I have 2 more questions.
2 more. Okay.
One is like, is there anything that I missed that you want to talk about? Something you've done or something that you think would be really important? This podcast is actually, I'm hoping a lot of people will listen to it, but it's for a lot of healthcare professionals who are like trying to find comedy or find something fun in their life. But is there anything that I missed that you think is important to tell people?
I think that the ability to acknowledge and heighten those absurd realities, I sort of alluded to it earlier, has really made me enjoy healthcare more, because I have to, instead of getting angry at the tone deaf middle managers who never touch a patient trying to set policy, if it's beyond my control, I just heighten that absurdity. Whether it's like being at a mandatory company cultural event where we're given a case study where we have to come up with $3 billion we're not going to get reimbursed next year when the CEO is making multi-millions of dollars. So I just tell the group, if we don't get this right, they're going to have a smaller yacht. Like heightening this, like these people we're like, some of these medical assistants are making minimum wage and we care about this money that anyways. And I'm not against people who are well-trained earning a good living, but I think if you could flip that perspective, sort of take an unconventional approach instead of being angry at it, if you want to change things, you have to highlight them. You have to acknowledge them. And yelling into the void is not changing things. But if you can spit it in a comedic light, it helps other people relate and to digest it more easily. And I think that's why we love comedians that aren't afraid to just tell us the truth, because that's what a lot of comedy is. It's scary because you're telling truths that can be really uncomfortable, but help call out the BS of society. So acknowledge and heighten those realities, absurd realities, and laugh at them if you can.
All right. I love that. It is absurd. And I'm learning, actually, there's so many parallels between human and animal health. We're going through a lot of the same things. Believe it or not, we're going through a lot of the same things.
I do. Yeah.
Because we have to deal with people. That's the commonality. Stressed out people. Okay, so here's the last question of this podcast is very serious.
Okay.
One of the goals of Co-Medicine is to get Dr. Ken Jeong to come on my podcast. So don't laugh. It's serious.
I'm sorry. It's very serious.
Very serious. You're not talking to everyone. You're speaking directly to Ken Jeong. Could you please invite him onto the podcast and tell him why he should come on?
Dr. Ken, this podcast deserves a real doctor on it, and I did not fit that bar at all. I am but a mere pharmacist who loves your work in community and many other works, and would love to follow your footsteps of making other people laugh someday. But yeah, I've set the bar so low that you will come on here and just crush it, because people will just be expecting someone like me. And then when they get you, they will really enjoy their experience.
All right, Ken, I hope you're listening. This has been so much fun. Thank you for coming on and playing. And I loved meeting you. So I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Oh, I appreciate the invitation. Yeah, this was great. And if people want more of me, you can just go to my website, CoreyJenks.com. It's C-O-R-Y. My parents were cheaped in by the vowel. So CORYJENKS.com. And from there, you can learn all about my socials and get my book. There's a link there. So if you get it and like it, please rate it highly or not. I love getting in front of people. If you're listening and you say, this guy would be great for my hospital, my clinic, again, my website is a great way to get a hold of me. I would love to travel to wherever you are on this globe and bring a little fun and utility and levity to your organization.
VPs, are you listening?
They are not.
They're totally listening.
They're
listening. Yeah, they are. They're like, oh, I got an idea. And they're going to put it on email out, and it's going to be amazing. We'll put all the info for you in the show notes as well. Anyone, if you're trying to find Corey, you can find him in our show notes. So thank you so much for being here. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you. You as well.
And that wraps up this episode of Co-Medicine. I've been Dr. Sarah Boston. Thank you so much for listening. I just want to give a big shout out to our exclusive title sponsor, Hill's Pet Nutrition, for helping to make this podcast possible and for supporting veterinarians and initiatives like this. Really, literally couldn't do it without you. I want to thank musical genius and stand-up comedian Mark Edwards for making music that somehow makes me laugh. I don't know how he does it. Please check out his info in his show notes. He is a stand-up comedian and actor. He's absolutely hilarious. And big thank you to my producer, Heather McPherson from Twisted Spur Media, who just seems to make everything work and everything sound great. And I also couldn't do this podcast without her. Thank you for listening. I hope you're having as much fun as I am. That might actually be hard because I am obsessed with this podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, please let us know, let your friends know, give us likes and nice comments, do all the things, help support this new podcast. If you didn't enjoy this podcast, I don't know what you're still doing here. You know what? If you didn't enjoy it, you can just do nothing. Nothing would be good. We will see you next episode. Thank you.